In the occupied West Bank, the displacement of dozens of Palestinian communities is also raising concerns, with violent attacks by Israeli settlers on the rise. At the same time, the Israeli government is declaring more and more land there as Israeli state-owned. Since the Hamas terrorist attacks on October 7th, Israel has reclassified 1,100 hectares in the West Bank as Israeli state land. And from there, Rebecca Ritters sent us this report.
For Borhan Basharat, everyday life has become a struggle. The Bedouin shepherd has been grazing his herds in these hills for decades, on lands his father and grandfather grazed too. But lately his livelihood and family tradition is coming under increased threat.
For 2, 3 or 4 months, on a daily basis, we have been experiencing violent assaults. It is not possible to sleep at night, fearing for our children. We are under constant threat, and at any moment we could get killed. We could have our houses and cabins burned. We could be displaced.
The threat comes from settler violence. Burhan's encampment is surrounded on one side by an Israeli settlement, considered illegal under international law, and on another by an outpost, an informal settlement considered illegal even under Israeli law. Burhan says lately it feels as though they're closing in.
After October 7th, they stabbed someone with a knife in Al-Maleh, burned houses, they attacked and confiscated livestock. One of the farmers from Dieflek, who got his livestock confiscated, had to pay around 40,000 shekels for it.
Livestock theft is not uncommon. According to Israeli liberal newspaper Haaretz, more than 500 goats and sheep have been stolen by armed Israeli settlers in recent months, sometimes in military uniform. Even more common than theft, though, is violence and intimidation. Scenes like these are a regular occurrence all over the West Bank. And the intimidation is working. Since the October 7th terror attack, settlers have forcibly displaced people from at least 20 herding communities and entirely uprooted another 7. The Israeli military is supposed to protect Palestinians living here, but a report by Human Rights Watch has found the military is either failing to do so or is directly involved in the violence. Israeli volunteer activists have stepped up their work in an effort to keep communities safe.
The protective presence started right after October 7. The communities were extremely threatened by settlers' visits and harassment, so we had to start coming in the nights. When we are there, much less is happening.
The activists say settler violence is part of an unofficial but deliberate Israeli policy to take land. But there's another official way too.
When they are declaring an area as state land.
Dror Edkers is the founder of Kerem Navot, an organisation engaged in monitoring and researching Israeli land policy in the West Bank. He says the reclassification of land is one of the main methods by which Israel seeks to assert control over land in the occupied territories.
Basically, they had surveyed this area. They were supposed to survey this area and to reach the conclusion that this area was not cultivated. And if it was not cultivated for a certain amount of years, so then they assume that it's state land. And Israel has a right to run this land. So you can assume that this area, which had been declared, is going to go to a body which is related to the Israeli settlement enterprise.
An enterprise the government is actively working to promote. When reclassifying the biggest pocket of land in decades, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said the move was an important and strategic issue. While there are those in Israel and in the world, he said, who seek to undermine our right to Judea and Samaria, we promote settlement through hard work and in a strategic manner all over the country. This year, more than 1,100 hectares of land has been reclassified as state land.
This is directly related to the political climate. They are doing it now in order to convey a message. We will do whatever we want. We are decisive to go on with the Israeli annexation of the West Bank.
And there's no legal way that a Palestinian can fight this, not the Palestinian Authority?
Not a practical one.
Despite the challenges, Burhan is determined to try to hold on to his land.
There's no justification. So I am living here in my land, right? These settlers, what business do they have here in my land? I have a title to this land. What do they want from me? Where should I go?
He hopes increased international pressure will help save his land for future generations.
And we can now speak to Tal Heinrich. She's a spokesperson for the Office of the Israeli Prime Minister. Welcome, Tal. Thank you so much for making time to come on DW today. Now, settler violence in the West Bank has seen a dramatic spike in recent months. Israel has security control over most of the West Bank. What does Prime Minister Netanyahu intend to do to stop the violence?
Well, thank you for having me on, Nicole. Actually, the numbers that I saw, the numbers that I'm familiar with, show a decrease in this already marginal phenomena that, of course, the Prime Minister has condemned. The Prime Minister said on multiple occasions that nobody in Israel, nobody should be taking the law into their own hands. And if someone does that, we prosecute, no matter their religious affiliation, no matter where they live, of course. And the Prime Minister has said it repeatedly, time and again. But what we should bring to light here is the fact that this is a marginal phenomenon. The overwhelming majority of the so-called settler community, Israeli Jews living in Judea and Samaria, we're talking about more than 500,000 people, are law-abiding citizens. So don't mistake the exception for the rule here. And the fact of the matter is that currently and historically, the Arab on Jewish violence in Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, is in much higher numbers than the other way around, even though media reporting does not reflect it.
We have seen 500 Palestinians killed as part of settler violence since October 7th. And the truth of the matter is that an overwhelming majority of settler attacks go unpunished. Why is that?
I'm not familiar with these numbers. These are not numbers that I can confirm.
What are the numbers that you have?
You know what? I want to add something important here about numbers. Again, I'm not sure where you're taking the numbers from, but sometimes, and you know, I've seen UN reports, for example, about this phenomena, so-called of settler violence, which it does exist. It's a marginal phenomena, and we fight it. But international reports, like a UN one that was issued a few months ago, they don't use real numbers because they take Palestinian assailants, for example, that commit crimes and carry out violence against Jews in Judea and Samaria, and they put them as victims of a so-called settler violence in these reports. So these numbers are not accurate.
The numbers that we have come from watchdogs who've been observing the situation for quite some time. But let's not get hung up on this then. I do want to move on because we did meet in the report that we just saw some people who are acutely affected by what you say is a marginal phenomenon. It does affect them in their everyday life. How do you expect Palestinians who are affected to react when they are attacked on their land?
Well, I speak for the Israeli Prime Minister's office. I don't speak to, Palestinians. What I can tell you is how the Prime Minister and how the government views this marginal phenomena that we, of course, take seriously. And nobody should be taking the law into their own hands. We prosecute, as I said, if there's any wrongdoing that we recognize, of course.
Many social and political scientists have found that experiences of trauma and violence increase the chances of radicalization. Now, you say that you go after the perpetrators of violence in the occupied territories, but how aware is the Netanyahu government of settler violence fostering mindsets that could in turn pose a risk to Israel's security?
I'm not sure I follow your question 100%, your question line here. But obviously, again, if there's any breaking of the law, we're against it, obviously.
But there are numbers. I think it is about 94% of settler attacks that go unpunished. Why is that, again?
I'm not familiar with these numbers.
All right, then let's move on. The U.S., of course, Israel's staunchest ally, they are opposed to settlement expansion. There are parts of the Israeli government that are very much in favor of settlement expansion. The U.S. says, Antony Blinken recently said it again, that new settlements are counterproductive to reach enduring peace and weaken Israel's security. What do you say to that?
So let's set the record straight here on a few things. Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria, the place from which Jews come from, Jews come from Judea, it does not go against international law as long as you don't twist the law to fit your political views. Judea and Samaria are rightful parts of, our Jewish homeland, the biblical heartland, and Jewish presence was, evident there for more than 3,000 years. Now, Jews have right to reside there alongside Palestinian Arab communities. There's no question about it. But settlements are not the main impediment to peace. If someone thinks that having Jewish neighbors is the main essence of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, well, they're dead wrong, Nicole, because the real impediment to peace between Israelis and Palestinians, let's put it right here on the table, is the Palestinian refusal to recognize, to acknowledge the very existence of the legitimacy of a Jewish state and Palestinian terrorism. If someone is really interested, in promoting peace and inquiring as for why there's no peace, these are the questions that they should be asking. How come the Palestinians have refused every peace offer since 1937 and up until, recent times? How come they started every conflict, lost it, only to cry victim and perpetuate a conflict? How come terror infrastructure and terror ammunition are found in almost in every Palestinian school, every Palestinian home? That's what our forces are discovering in Gaza. So
all right,
you and I can sit here and talk about settlements, but that's not the essence of the conflict.
Let's look at the war in Gaza, which continues, of course, and it is widely acknowledged by many people that the settlements in the West Bank, among others, do breach international law. But let's look at the conflict that we've been focusing on for the past months, ever since the October 7th terror attacks. Prime Minister Netanyahu called the truce proposal that was presented by President Biden last week partial. So what does Netanyahu's plan for peace look like? What did Biden miss?
To make things clear, we have set 3 war objectives right after the October 7th massacre. We said that we want to dismantle Hamas as a governing body, a political body in the Gaza Strip, and as a military wing, to make sure that they will no longer have the military capabilities, nor the desire to attack us again after this war. The second goal is, of course, to bring all our hostages, the stolen people, back home, and to make sure that Gaza will never, ever pose a terror threat to us again. Now, Israel, like President Biden said, has put on the table very generous proposals that were rejected time and again by Hamas because they're not interested in releasing hostages so far. They haven't been serious about these negotiations in recent weeks, as you know. But the claims that we agreed to a ceasefire proposal that will not meet our conditions, I mean, these are incorrect. These are false claims. We will not agree to any kind of a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, I'm talking about, that would leave Hamas in power and some hostages in Gaza.
All right. We have spoken over the past months, ever since October 7th, to countless experts who say that Netanyahu appears to be more interested in staying in power than in actually reaching a lasting peace. Now, would he be willing to risk his government falling apart if it meant an end to the war and a return of the hostages?
Well, I just stated 3 war objectives that the Prime Minister and honestly every Israeli, almost every Israeli, an overwhelming majority of people in my country are eager to achieve. There will be no compromise on our security. This is not about a political survival, by the way, Nicole. This is about the survival of the nation of Israel, Jews, Christians, Muslims who refuse to simply die in the hands of a terrorist organization. So we will continue to plow on in Gaza and make sure that our goals are reached.
If it would mean that he would have to risk his governing coalition, would he agree to a deal that could lead to that end?
Again, this is not what's on the table right now. We're not dealing with politics. Very few people in my country, in fact, are dealing with politics right now, because what I told you is that
members of his coalition have said that they would not stay in the coalition if the deal that was presented by Joe Biden, for example, were to go through.
Well, but what I am saying is that the deal that was presented is not 100% accurate, because as the Prime Minister said in recent days, we will not agree to a ceasefire that will leave some hostages in Gaza and Hamas in power. So we're not talking about a permanent ceasefire here. The terms of the recent deal that were discussed and the nature of the talks is not something that I can discuss on air with you, but I can guarantee to you that there is no notion of a permanent ceasefire that would leave Hamas in power.
That is Tal Heinrich, spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister. Thank you so much.
Thank you.